Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is my pleasure to stand before you once again on my fifth occasion to contribute to the debate on the Appropriation Bill 2024. I am grateful to both the Honourable Prime Minister and my constituents in Labray for the confidence and support that they have shown by allowing me to stand before you today. Let me place on record, Madam Speaker, my commendations to the Minister of Finance and his team for delivering a budget based on a most apt theme that is well thought out and imbues optimism for the coming year. To those opposite, I will try to convince you, and I have to say, not you really, but put another way, I am happy that stripped of partisan politics and blind loyalty, we have been able to get 5 of what I consider to be some of the best presentations over my last 5 years. And I am happy that you have finally seen the light. The Minister of Finance has been criticized for having a 5.25-hour deliberation. And sometimes it's very difficult to please people in this country. Because if he did it in 1 hour, we would get a barrage of questions saying why he didn't explain this and why he didn't explain that. But he took the time to go through a budget that was quite comprehensive and which at this time in our economic life is critical to what we do and how we go forward in the future. We somehow would always find a way to throw water on what we are doing. Madam Speaker, if we look at the international community post-COVID-19, we see a number of them are in fact growing, and there is some, they're just growing. But in Trinidad and Tobago, we have some unique issues with revenue, and somehow we always seem to point at the expenditure side to say that we want more of this, more of that. It's never less and or dealing with it in a balanced way. It's always about more. And as the member for Tabaquite would have indicated, that the question is not always about more. Sometimes it's about using what you have, using it creatively, and using it in the best interest of citizens. As defined. Some of the things that at the level of labor we look at within the economy is the unemployment rate, and over the last 4 years, the employment rate has moved within 1 or 2 points, but it has been steady somewhat. Another indicator is the labor participation rate, which seeks to identify how many people that can access jobs are actually working and who are not. In the last 4 years, that figure was constant around 560,400 people employed in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, one would ask, why and how can you have about the same figure every year for the last 4 years? And the answer is quite easy, Madam Speaker, and that is there are lots of persons who would have lost jobs and who would have come out of the employment market. But because this government created new jobs, the jobs that were lost, people found alternative jobs, And that shows that there is a measure of growth, although it doesn't seem that way, because if we lost 5,000 jobs in the 560,000, then we would have also created 5,000 jobs to keep it at a standard and steady figure. So it's not all doom and gloom, and it does not, oh, by the way, where is my good friend, the member for Hoover South? I guess he'd be running in the chamber any minute now. He'd be running any time soon, we would see him coming. I hate to have these speeches without him. You know, the Trinidad and Tobago, in terms of its approach to labor and providing citizens with decent work in a safe and healthy environment, and so on, have aligned ourselves with the International Labour Organization Global Coalition for Social Justice. This coalition seeks to achieve social justice and decent work for all, expanding multilateral cooperation to achieve sustainable development goals. Signing on this coalition cements Trinidad and Tobago's commitment to social justice and allows the country to benefit from access. And it allows it to benefit from access to potential partnerships as well as invaluable forum for exchange of knowledge on the best practices available. But before I get more deeply into the work of the Ministry of Labor, there are two issues I wish to deal with. The first being, Madam Speaker, and on the whole aspect of social justice, we must make mention of the notable step the government took in the past fiscal year to move the minimum wage from $17.50 to $20.50 per hour. As we know, this is an increase of $3 or 17% and affects 190,000 workers across Trinidad and Tobago. The Minister of Finance announced a government decision to increase the minimum. Well, let me give some clarification. I have been asked as Minister of Labor about the new minimum wage. Let me say categorically that the minimum wage in Trinidad and Tobago is $20.50. That's the minimum wage. However, employers can, if they so wish and they have the ability, to move the hourly rate of those they employ to anything they want. They can move it from $20.50 to $23 to $25. The government, as a responsible government, took the position that we have a certain classification of workers within the public sector that is in receipt of $20.50. And because we feel that based on their hard work and their contribution, that the government can increase their hourly wages to $22.50, that decision was made. That is a 9.8% increase, and if you add that to the 17% in January of this year, you would see us going in the right direction. Some persons may say that that is not enough. But again, what is enough? That's right. What is enough? We have impacted and will impact the lives of many of our workers in the public sector, like CPEP, MTS, URP, and That is approximately 18,000 people. And I urge those private sector companies who are still at the $20.50, there is nothing holding you back if you feel that you are getting the productivity levels and that your workers are good for you to increase their rate. The government has not said and will not compel you to do so, and that is a decision for each business to make on its own. But keep in mind that sometimes profit is not the only measure of being a good businessman or a good citizen. Some may argue about the businessman part, but certainly as a citizen, you can do some good with those who support you. I am sure, Madam Speaker, and I wanted to take away 2 lines or so from the member for Couva South because he will bring it up, about the government not utilizing good industrial relations practices by not engaging the worker representatives in the 5% proposed increase. But this is a budget, Madam Speaker, and in budgets, we cater for what we intend to do in a particular period, and if it is not budgeted, then if it comes to fruition and you have to pay it, then you cannot pay it if it is not budgeted. And therefore, by signaling a 5% to public sector workers, the Minister of Finance has essentially said that we are budgeting 5%. We expect to engage the worker representatives, and they can either accept or reject or renegotiate the order. That cannot be done in a budget, but we have to budget for it to be done. And therefore, I would hope that the issue of engagement of those in the worker representative groups will not be an issue. This is basic business. Madam Speaker, as we are on the topic of minimum wage, I want to recognize the excellent work being done by our Labor Inspectorate unit in promoting compliance with the Minimum Wage Act and other pieces of labor legislation. The labor inspectors have been working diligently towards educating and enforcing the new minimum wage provisions, along with the continued enforcement of the Maternity Protection Act and investigating reports of child labor across Trinidad and Tobago. You see, Madam Speaker, we have a number of policies and a number of laws and so on, but people sometimes don't do the right thing. People do what you inspect, not what you expect. And therefore, the Inspectorate plays an important part in creating fairness throughout Trinidad and Tobago. You would be surprised, Madam Speaker, how many businesses do not pay their workers minimum wage. How many businesses may try to employ child labor. How many businesses do not treat pregnancy and paternity leave and so on in the way that it should be. And this unit does a yeoman service to ensuring that these people are not marginalized or taken advantage of. That's right. During the period, welcome Couva South. I've been waiting on you and giving some advice in your absence, but you're here now. Right. During the period October 2023 to September 2024, the Labour Inspectorate Unit provided information and advice on labour rights and responsibilities to 275 walk-in clients and 724 via the telephone. For this same period, the unit received 386 complaints, and labour inspectors conducted 802 inspections, resulting in the recovery of $1,728,000 to people who did not receive wages and/or increases illegally. Not only the Labour Inspectorate Unit, but the Ministry's Conciliation, Advisory and Advocacy Division, CAD, has been hard at work treating with conciliation and mediation matters, providing advice to both employers and workers. For the period 2023 to 2024, the division engaged in over 3,000 hours of conciliatory meetings and 84 collective agreements and reviewed 76 proposals for negotiation. Madam Speaker, unlike those on the opposite side, we understand that to boost the morale of the workforce, we strive to keep them informed. To bridge the gap in knowledge between employers and employees, the ministry conducted numerous public education sessions in both private and public entities. Some of these include the Communication Workers Union, the Airports Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, the State Police Association of Trinidad and Tobago, the Trinidad and Tobago Association of the Hearing Impaired, and many others. These sessions focused on sexual harassment in the workplace, industrial relations procedures, progressive discipline, natural justice, grievance handling, and conflict resolution, to name a few. This is not all. The ministry has undeniably sought to understand and protect the rights of migrant workers. To this end, CAD, the conciliatory group, has supported the migrant community through sessions held with La Casita Hispanic Cultural Center, Living Waters Community Ministry of Migrants, and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. These meetings, Madam Speaker, were aimed at providing advice on seeking redress for employment-related issues and areas for further collaboration. I am pleased to announce, Madam Speaker, that a memorandum of understanding was signed between the Ministry and the Living Water community on October 31st, 2023. This MOU signals the unrelenting commitment to protect the rights of migrant workers, as we do for all workers in Trinidad and Tobago. And let me say, Madam Speaker, that based on signing on to various ILO conventions and so on, that we do not treat issues raised by migrant workers any differently than we do to citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. We have a duty of care to ensure that all those who access work in Trinidad and Tobago are treated fairly, regardless of race, color, political affiliation, or country of origin. Since I have been at the helm of the Ministry of Labour, I have emphasized time and time again the importance of data and evidence in order to understand the labour market and to guide our policies and programs. It is in this regard that we have been consistently working to strengthen our labour market information system at the Ministry. I am happy to say that these efforts have borne results. For instance, Madam Speaker, our Labour Market Information Unit has been diligently working and now has completed the job vacancy survey of the private sector and state enterprises, and a job vacancy census on the civil service. These surveys, Madam Speaker, are geared towards determining employees' unfulfilled demand for labor in specific sectors. When approved by Cabinet, the information from the surveys will provide valuable demand-side data and work to inform policies across the government and also the private sector. Madam Speaker, while these surveys present baseline data for utilization, it is in the intention of the Ministry to continue these surveys on an ongoing basis so it can be timely and updated on an ongoing basis. In the coming year, Madam Speaker, the Ministry proposes to undertake job vacancy surveys on the municipal and regional corporations, regional health authorities, and protective services. Work has already begun and will continue on the vacancy surveys of the teaching service, statutory boards, and similar bodies. These activities will give us a much clearer picture as to where the demand for labor exists in these sectors. In addition to these studies, we are working assiduously with the Ministry of Public Administration to have these and other data sets available to the public via the Ministry's website. I turn my attention to legislative reform. Madam Speaker, it is no secret that one of the key priorities of the Ministry is the modernization of our labor legislative framework. As we all know, legislative review is a lengthy and inclusive process, and while I will not list all of the work that has been done since this project started, allow me to mention a few. 1. The Sexual Harassment in the Workplace Bill is currently before the Chief Parliamentary Council. 2. A policy paper on the Employment Exchange Act was approved by Cabinet in March of 2024, authorizing the Attorney General to move forward with amending this legislation. 3. A draft policy position paper on the Maternity Protection Act, Chapter 4557, was submitted to Cabinet in May 2024, and the public consultations were held in Trinidad in September 2023 and in Tobago in 2024 on legislation to govern HIV and AIDS in the workplace. In addition to continuing work on these pieces of legislation, it is proposed that in 2025 that we focus on the Employment Standards Bill, which seeks to develop basic terms and conditions of work, the Truck Act, Chapter 8807, and the Trade Dispute and Protection of Property Act, Chapter 8803. Moreover, Madam Speaker, the Ministry expects to do further work on the Industrial Relations Act and the Retrenchment and Severance Benefit Act, which is in an advanced stage, ready to move forward. We also speak at our Ministry with regards to the formation of policies. So while we speak about work on the review of the labor legislation, the team at the Ministry has also been strengthening the policy framework that guides rights and responsibilities in the workplace. The national workplace policies, Madam Speaker, provide employers and employees and stakeholders with the guidelines and standards expected within the workplace. The Ministry continues to collaborate with all its stakeholders to ensure inclusive, safe, healthy, and productive workplaces. Madam Speaker, we have a problem in the workplace in Trinidad and Tobago, which is known as sexual harassment in the workplace, where many, not only our females, but one will not, there's also sexual harassment with regards to males. So And it is an issue, and the ministry aims to really ensure that the creation of this policy reaches its targeted audience by sensitizing employers and employees, virtually and in person, as to how to manage this particular issue. It is also an issue, particularly among the migrant workers, and in that regard, the ministry has translated and printed all its brochures in Spanish to address this language barrier. The ministry has also launched a national trilingual English, Spanish, and French hotline or helpline 800-CAAD in June of 2023 to specifically address sexual harassment in the workplace. The helpline assists and supports employers and employees, inclusive of migrant workers. Our efforts, Madam Speaker, to achieve a more inclusive workplace and keeping in mind our migrant population, the ministry has been building capacity through the assistance of the International Organization for Migration, or IOM, to improve the proficiency of labor inspectors in Spanish. Although I'm sure we could get some lessons from some of those opposite in how to speak Spanish well. These upskilling programs have enabled our officers to better perform their investigative duties by improving their ability to communicate and interact with Spanish-speaking migrant workers, both those exploited and those involved in decent work. One of the things, Madam Speaker, that struck me when I got to the ministry 4 years ago was the issue of a national workplace policy on HIV and AIDS. I, at that time, in my ignorance, thought that AIDS and HIV was somehow not very prevalent, and it, with all the advances in medicine and all those things, it was going actually down. And then I recognized that the issue of AIDS and HIV is not just about infections. It's about mental health. It's about people's views. It's about how they see someone who has the disease. It's about the society and inclusiveness, and it's how we treat people. And we speak about bullying and so on, but we also have that kind of aspect in the HIV and AIDS framework. And therefore, when we create such a policy and implement, we really need to reduce the stigma and discrimination in the workplace against people who are affected with HIV and AIDS. The Ministry of Labor, to this end, and if we were to look at some statistics, we would have gone out, or the HIV workplace advocacy units would have engaged 72 workplaces and 229 workers in sensitization activities. Furthermore, the unit assisted 25 workplaces in developing their own workplace policy. So besides our national policy, many organizations do not have an individual workplace policy that guides their behavior and how they do things. As we know, Madam Speaker, policies and programs need to be revisited and reviewed to ensure they meet current and future needs. In this regard, I'm pleased to mention that the ministry has engaged the University of the West Indies Health Economic Unit Center for, let me say that again. We have engaged the University of the West Indies Health Economics Unit, Center for Health Economics, St. Augustine, to conduct a national baseline survey on knowledge, attitudes, beliefs, and practices on HIV in the workplace. This survey will gather important data to inform the current national policy, as well to guide strategies for interventions in the future. Moreover, we are also engaged in looking at the mental health and how it impacts and works along with HIV in the workplace. And the National AIDS Coordinating Committee, Madam Speaker, would have done a poster entitled or called Psychosocial Distress of Persons Living with AIDS and HIV in the Workplace in Trinidad and Tobago. And this was prepared and presented at the 25th International HIV Conference in Germany in July of 2024. The project findings are expected to be presented at the National Health Research Conference being held in Trinidad in November 2024. I move to child labor, Madam Speaker. And in keeping with our commitment to implement ILO Convention number 182 on the worst forms of child labor, the Ministry has been enhancing its efforts towards the prevention and elimination of child labor in this, our beloved country. To guide this work, we have constituted and reconstituted in February of this year the National Steering Committee for the Prevention and Elimination of Child Labor. Under the guidance of the committee, some of the major achievements made include the development of a draft situational analysis on child labor, the production of a jingle and logo to be used to outreach and sensitization activities, the launch of a child ambassador program with 30 child ambassadors being appointed in 7 secondary schools across Trinidad, the hosting of a national multipartite stakeholder consultation on child labor, and the hosting of key stakeholder consultations for the development of hazardous and light work lists for Trinidad and Tobago. These programs have been conducted both in Trinidad and Tobago during the period 2024. In recognizing the issue of child labor, we really need a collaborative approach. The ILO Decent Work Team and Office for the Caribbean donated tablets for use by the labor inspectors when conducting inspections. Madam Speaker, the support from our international partners have been tremendous as we are offered the benefit of their expertise. And in this regard, Cabinet has recently agreed to the Ministry of Labor engaging the International Labour Organization for technical assistance towards the development of a national policy. I am pleased to say that this initiative will be expedited in the coming year, 2025. With regards to safety and health of workers, the Ministry is cognizant of the importance of promoting the safety and health of all workers. Unfortunately, too many times we have been reminded of the importance of this when it is already too late. We have a number of deaths that took place in Trinidad and Tobago over the last decade that could have been avoided, that really took place because we didn't have in place the mindset or the necessary regulations to deal with them. And it is important and quite heartening to see that the International Labour Organization has recognized this safety and health of workers as a fundamental principle in 2022. The Ministry of Labour continues to drive initiatives aimed at ensuring workplace safety and health through the Occupational Safety and Health Agency. Sometimes, Madam Speaker, a number of us see us as a necessary evil, and we get very upset and concerned when they stop work or do things in our particular area. It's all well and fine for them to stop work and do things in other people's environment, but when they come to our workplace and raise issues, we somehow have a problem with how they work and what they do. And I want to speak to all employers that are hearing my voice here. It is important that you take health and safety seriously. Sometimes we do not get to attach limbs, and we cannot breathe life back into dead bodies. And if we don't recognize that we require some basic issues in the workplace to make it safe and to save just one life, it will be worth it. Too often, we see people taking things for granted. And you know the proverbial, something is done and you step over it and pretend you didn't see it, and then somebody passes and slip, and that's somebody in a wheelchair after that. So please, I urge you to put your safety policies and procedures in place, ensure that they are adhered to. Simple things, Madam Speaker, I walk down steps all the time, and I walk through the steps in Parliament here, and I see my colleagues going down the steps and nobody is holding the rail. All we need is one trip and a slip, and you are history. Yeah? So it's very simple things like that. Just walking down the steps. Hold on to the railing. You know, or you see some water on the ground because a teacup broke and you step over it and the maid will come and fix that. You know, those simple things have far-reaching effects. So I urge everyone at the sound of my voice to please take some personal responsibility also for your actions. Madam Speaker, I turn now to productivity. And I've heard a number of people over time speak towards the productivity in Trinidad and Tobago. And if we are honest with ourselves, we will know that productivity is really not what it should be. From people doing work in your home, to people doing work in government businesses, to people doing work on plants, we somehow have an issue with productivity. In a past life, when I worked in an area that dealt with engineering and contracts, when we did estimates and we needed to normalize those estimates between foreign bids and local bids, there was like a 20-point spread between what we call wrench time, which is the time you actually do work. And there are actually some standards around that. And what we found is that foreign companies may come with a 70% wrench time against local companies that we will gauge at a 45% wrench time. That has implications for the length of time the work gets to be done. And it really speaks about paying more for getting less. And if we really were to try and define it, we will find that we will have different ideas about what productivity is and what does it mean. But I said all that to say this, that there is an issue with national productivity, and there is a National Productivity Council, which the Ministry of Labour would have revived in 2023, October. And part of its mandate is to develop indicators and metrics to allow for the effective measurement of productivity at the micro, macro, and meso levels. Additionally, the Council will be undertaking studies to capture pertinent baseline data on productivity across sectors, and is also formulating a program to educate the population about productivity and engage with citizens with a view to influencing behavioral change. I turn now to employment promotion. Most people listening to my contribution would ask, what about jobs? The most prevalent question I get from people that I engage with on a daily basis is, boss, you are Minister of Labour, give me a work. And you are Minister of Labour, dial somebody and you could make it happen. You know? And well, I'm told that my other colleagues get it, you know, and people sometimes don't seem to understand how jobs are created and where they come from. And in my mind, there are a number of ways that we can enhance job creation and improve the workforce. But everybody seeks sustainable employment. But where does that sustainable employment come from? I want persons to think for a moment, Madam Speaker, and as the Finance Minister would have made in his contribution, and he spoke about government commitment to empowering individuals through supporting the creation of sustainable jobs. And if we look through the budget, we see that a number of projects have been included, which speaks to road and highway rehabilitation, modernizations of hotels such as Magdalena, Grand Beach, Gulf and Gulf Resort, Hilton, Trinidad and Conference Center, an international branded hotel in Tobago, the Maracas Bay Hotel, the creation of a marina in Tobago, just to name a few. Not only will the construction and development of many of these projects generate employment at the construction phase, but when they are functional, more sustainable jobs will be created, both in the tourism sector and at the particular sites. I can speak to that kind of activity through many of the ministries that we have. I can speak to it from youth development and national service,
Honourable
education.
Member, you have 2 more minutes of original speaking time available for you. You're entitled to 10 more minutes to wind up your presentation. Are you availing yourself of same?
Yes, I will.
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun. Madam Speaker, we have a number of areas in which the Ministry of Labour helps support the jobs and so on, and that is through our National Employment Service. We also do it through the OJT program, and we also do it through the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Program, more commonly referred to as the Canadian Farm Program. And just to say that in relation to the OJT, we are looking at expanding to 6,000 from about 4,500 that we have now. We have something that is important to mention is that we have a number of new service providers coming on, and we have signed a number of memorandum of understanding with a number of companies, including Phoenix Park Gas Processors, TOSL Engineering, Telecommunication Services of TNT, Trinidad and Tobago Postal Corporation, Lake Asphalt, Handanol, because we recognize that in many instances there are many graduates and technical people coming out of school now that requires a different kind of intervention than the O-level and the associate degree type persons. So we have to actually go out there and look for service providers who could give us some of those openings to place people. We have a lot of engineers now we have entered into a collaboration with Ministry of Education for some support. We have also looked at the public utilities and WASA, where we have a number of technical and engineering OJTs and so on being assigned to, and therefore we are quite happy with that. One of the major issues that in my short time I would like to mention, and that is with the Cypriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. And I am particularly indeed happy with our collaboration with the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service for the development of a community-based action for resilience and success. And this has been oversubscribed, this particular intervention, where we are looking to create opportunities for our young people, both by way of developing them mentally and by giving them opportunities within the college to look at careers that they may not have looked at before. One of the things that I would like to put on record is that when I came in to office, I had a conversation with the board and management of the Cypriani College, and I told them that as a labor institution and an academic institution, I expect them to be at the forefront of all things labor. They should be advising both workers and workers' representatives and businesses on labor issues. I am happy to announce that they would have taken up that challenge. And today, for instance, they have, and within the college itself, they have had people and lecturers and so on who would have published 3 books with major international academic publishers. They have published a refereed academic journal. They have collaborated with multiple international partners to assist in the conduct of research and development policy. And they would have created a number of academic conferences which have drawn participation throughout the region and sometimes even further out. They recently signed a contract with the Caribbean Development Bank to conduct groundbreaking research into labor market differentials in 16 countries, from the Bahamas in the north to Suriname in the south. This is pioneering work, and it will provide governments and the social partners in the region with detailed analysis and a data set that has a specific grounding in the Caribbean experience. Like most of the speakers before me, Madam Speaker, I did not realize that time could fly so fast, and therefore I now turn my attention to my constituency and those in the library. Library is a different kind of constituency because of our geography and so on. Sometimes to get from one end of library to go to the next, you have to take 3 taxis and go through 2 other constituencies. And that's just how it's made up. But I am grateful that over the last 4 years that we have gotten some of the pie. I understand that with 41 constituencies, you cannot get everything. You will not get everything. But you have to prioritize and fight for those things that you really do need. I would like to thank first the Ministry of Works for the work they would have done, particularly in the area where we had some road slippages and so on, and that they have repaired. I know they have some more work to do, but I'm grateful for the work that was done. The Ministry of Youth Development and National Service, we are doing some really good groundbreaking work with them. They have given us the Los Bajos youth facility. They are doing some work on the beach camp area with Milat and shade housing. And they have provided a number of different programs that the young people are taking to, one of which being the Heritage Apprenticeship Program that we take, that we are currently enjoying. I also want to acknowledge the work that is being done on the velodrome in Palo Seco that should be completed in the first quarter of 2025. We also have a community center in the community of Labre, which is about 98% complete and should be commissioned before the end of the year. I would like to thank the Minister of Public Utilities for the work done on providing lights at the Vance River ground, and I will let him know that the children and those are already using it, making perfect use of it. And before I run out of time, I have some other things to say, but before I run out of time, I also want to say on behalf of the citizens in the area from Erin to Siparia, a very, very hearty thank you to the residents, from the residents to WASA, for the work they would have done in providing water where there was none before. We have seen WASA came into our community, made promises, and everybody say, yeah, right, yeah, okay. And with their hard-working minister, I have seen every promise made fulfilled. And the people of the Labre community, we are overjoyed, over happy to get a commodity that is basic to life, 20,000 people, right, for almost 20,000 people. So, I also want to thank all the sponsors in my community like Tufco Heritage, TGU, and all those who have helped in our educational trust, where we have instituted in our schools STEM programs, homework centers, the provision of laptops and other equipment to make students' life better. I want to thank the cultural groups who would have done work with regards to the emancipation celebrations. We also created some parang competitions, which is the first competition every year in Trinidad right now. We have done plenty work on roads and drains, and in particular in the community of Pariland, we would have done some really extensive retaining walls and so on that really saved scores of homes from sliding off hills and so on. So there are so much things to be grateful for and be thankful for. I will not and I will never count what I don't have, but I will bless what I do have. And in that regard, I thank all my colleagues who would have supported me, who I would have harassed, who I would have cornered, who I would have jacked up, and who I would have made some creative words that we all know.
And good friendship.
And good friendship. So, Madam Chairman, with that, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. Again, to the Prime Minister and to the residents in Labrie for allowing me this opportunity to make this short contribution.
Member for Couva South.